the next one is Aristotle. Aristotle is used to be Plato's followers. He was another one in early time that influenced all the later philosophers. He argued that ethical knowledge is not certain knowledge, but it's general knowledge. Because it is not theoretical discipline, a person had to study and practice in order to be virtuous. So if you want to be good, you should be practicing, not just only learning and just don't practice, it doesn't work. Virtuous activities are activities that considered to be a good one, to be virtue, is that every skill and every inquiry and similarly every action and choice of action is thought to have some good as its object. This is why the good has rightly been defined as object of all endeavor. That means no matter what you do, it has to be good. Everything is done with a goal, and that goal is good. Not doing good because of the money or because of something that you want in return. The highest good for Aristotle is that something is desirable for its own sake. You do something good because of its own sake, its own goal. The highest good is not desirable for the sake of achieving some other good, and all other goods desirable for its sake. This involves achieving eudaimonia, usually translated as happiness, that is well-being or flourishing or excellent. What is the highest good in all matters of action? The highest good of all action is happiness. Happiness is identical with the good life and successful living. When you lead your life to be successful, you always happy and come with smiling face. So how you can lead your life to be successful and to be happy? You need to have self-control. In the Hellenistic period, the Cynic is a group of philosophers, said that the purpose of life is living a life of virtue that agrees with nature. That means it should be natural good. Everyone should have their own purpose of life. If you don't have purpose, how can you lead your life for? Do you know which way to go? Which is the end of the way that you want to reach? So at first, when you grown up, when you can be aware of yourself, you know what you want, what you need, you set your own purpose, your own goal of life, your life goal. Happiness depends upon being self-sufficient and master of one's mental attitude. Suffering is consequence of false judgments of value, which cause negative emotions and concomitant vicious character. That means when you don't have the right judgment, if you perceive something to be valuable for you, but if it's not proper, it might return in bad result. So you need to make proper judgment on your own value. What kind of value should be considered to be good or proper? It depends on your perception and your socialization. How you are socialized and what kind of thing should be considered to be important and to be valuable for you นะคะ Sometimes it depends on each society is culture that comes for customary นะคะ The cynical life reject conventional desire for wealth, power, health, and fame นะคะ by being free of the possession of or acquiring in pursuing the conventional. Anything that is not necessary for yourself, you don't need to possess. You don't need to have it. This is like modest life. This group of philosophers consider modest life is better. As reasoning creatures, people could achieve happiness via rigorous training by living in a way natural to human beings. Natural human being, that means you should live with the nature. Don't destroy nature because it's like you were born from the four factors, that is earth or soil and water and air and fire. Fire means something that is hot or warm. In Thai is ดินน้ำลมไฟนะคะ All human being has these four elements นะคะ The world equally belongs to everyone on this earth when after you were born. So suffering is caused by false judgment of what is valuable and what is worthless per the custom and convention of society นะคะ It will different from society to society นะคะ Okay, Siren. This is another one. Sirenism, founded by Aristotle of Siren. Siren is the name of the city. Was an early Socratic school that emphasized only side of Socrates' teaching. We mentioned about Plato, Aristotle, and then this one is Socrates. Happiness is one of the ends of moral action, and that pleasure is the supreme good. For Socrates, hedonistic is another group of people that view bodily gratification is more intense than mental pleasure. Cyrenics prefer immediate gratification to the long-term gain of delayed gratification. Denial is unpleasant unhappiness. That means they emphasize on the physical body rather than mental gratification. Another group is Epicurean. Epicurean consider the greatest good in seeking modest pleasure to attain tranquility and freedom from fear, or ataraxia, via knowledge, friendship, and virtues. Temperate living, bodily pain is absent through one's knowledge of the working of the world and of the limits of one's desire. Combine freedom from pain and freedom from fear are happiness in its highest form. This group praise enjoyment of simple pleasure. Is quasi-aesthetic abstention from sex and appetite. This is a belief of certain group. No pain in body and soul, no afterlife. This group believe in this. The next one, the Stoicism, teaching that living according to reason and virtue is to be in harmony with the universe, divine order, entailed by one's recognition of the universal logos or reason and essential value of all people. The meaning of life is freedom from suffering through apatheia that is being objective, having clear judgment, not indifferent. You have to be clear. You have to choose between right and wrong. Prime directives of this group are virtue, reason, and natural law. Belief in natural law, along with develop personal self-control and mental fortitude as means of overcoming destructive emotions. The Stoic does not seek to extinguish emotions, only to avoid emotional troubles by developing clear judgment and inner calm through diligently practice logic, reflection, and concentration. That is, practice your mind, control your mind, and make proper judgment. Ethical foundation of this group is good means in the state of the soul. You have to control your soul. Wisdom and self-control is important for this group. Improving one's spiritual well-being, that means you need to be wise to make wise decisions. Virtue consists of a will or willpower. That means you have to have your own will, which is in agreement with the nature, go along with the nature, natural willpower of human being. The principle applied to one's personal relation, that is to be free from anger, envy, and jealousy. Control yourself, to be modest, and then not to be angry easily, not to be envy or jealousy of the others. Stoicism would be similarly to Buddhism. The Enlightenment and the colonial era change the concept changed from devotion and subservience to God to notions of, as time changed, the concept and the way of thinking of the people is always changing. To the Enlightenment and the colonial era, both changed from devotion and subservience to God into notions of inalienable natural rights and the potentialities of reasons. This means that it's more reasoning than only to the thinking or respecting to the God only. It's changing to be recognizing about reasoning, and then changing from universal ideals of love and compassion to civic notions of freedom, equality, and citizenships. That means they change to consider and perceive people in general more than in the past. The meaning of life changed as well. From focusing less on humankind's relationship to God. The relationship between human and God seemed to be weaker for the time after that. Two more on the relationship between individuals and their society. So social ties is more or stronger later on. This era is filled with theories that equate meaningful existence with the social orders. Classical liberalism, this is another group that if consider about all conflicts between a growing wealthy property class and the established aristocratic and religious orders that dominate Europe. This is Western concept. they see the difference between the rich and the poor นะคะ liberalism considers individual liberty to be the most important goal นะคะ now they recognize people at large more than only small group of the rich or high society นะคะ because only through ensure liberty are the other inherent rights protected that means they are thinking more about people in general that the people at large their rights should be protected นะคะ There are many forms and derivations of liberalism but their central conceptions of the meaning of life trace back to three main ideas. The three main ideas are like those introduced by John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and Adam Smith นะคะ These three persons offer different ideas นะคะ Humankind beginning in the state of nature, then finding meaning for existence through labor and property, and using social contracts to create an environment that support those efforts. So there will be new social contracts that people living together should be under that contract. There are different group of people. The one leading by Kant, which we call Kantianism, philosophy based on the ethical, epistemological, and metaphysical works of Immanuel Kant. Kant is known for his deontological theory. You should remember this word, the ontology. This is the concept of Kant. There is a single moral obligation which is called categorical imperative. Categorical imperative นะคะ That means it's linked to concept of duty. Whatever set up, you have to have duty to follow, to perform based on that นะคะ Kantians believe all actions are performed in accordance with some underlying maxim or principle นะคะ You have to, it's your duty to follow that principle นะคะ And for actions to be ethical, they must adhere to the categorical imperative นะคะ So the meaning of categorical imperative is that it's exactly, it's your duty bound that you have to follow that principle. The test is that one must universalize the maxim, that principle. Imagine that all people act in this way, no matter what. That maxim or that principle, it's for what everyone has to follow that, and then see if it's would still be possible to perform the maxim in the world without contradiction. You have to see if it's anybody disagree with or not นะคะ Kant give the example of a person who seek to borrow money with, and this is example, if a person seeks to borrow money without intending to pay it back, this is a contradiction to the principle, because if you borrow, you have to return it. But if you don't return it, no one would be willing to let you borrow anymore. So this is an example of universal, and you have to follow, you have duty to follow that principle. That this is a contradiction, because if it were a universal action, that means you have to pay it back. no person would lend you any money anymore if you don't pay it back at the first time. So knows that he will never be paid back. If he know that anyone who do not or intend not to pay back, no one would let him borrow that money. The maxim of this action result in a contradiction in conceivability and thus contradicts perfect duty. Understand? This one means the principle is that if you do something, you have to follow that principle. This example is that the social contract is that if you borrow something from the other person, you have the duty to pay it back. Otherwise, no one would let you do that anymore. But this group, utilitarianism, this one is consider only the utility or the benefit of your own self. Introduced by Jeremy Bentham. He found that nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters, that is pain and pleasure. Then from the moral insight or moral part, delivering the rule of utility, that the good is whatever brings the greatest happiness to the greatest number of people. He defined the meaning of life as the greatest happiness principle. So this one, the modern people might consider as being selfish, because you consider only your own benefit, utilitarianism. You consider only those benefit to you. This concept was supported by James Mill, James Stuart Mill. This is opposite to Kantianism. Kant and utilitarianism is the opposite extreme. Both of them has both beneficial advantage or disadvantage. We have to consider later on. Various concept. There are, besides Kant and utilitarianism, there are some more concepts. For example, like to discover what makes you happy, and then you go do more about it. It depends on each individual. Or some people might think that to do what makes you to come alive. When you stop, you die. So you do that. Or some people might think that to speculate on your place in the universe, to see what and who and where you are, and then you follow from that. Or some people might think that life is just happiness,